you have a classroom where people are listening and reflecting, you are maybe one of the natural outcomes of that is that you're also going to be building community. And maybe for me, as I'm even reflecting on protocols today, it's like I've never thought as protocols as community building, but building trust and all these other things and relationships and learning and
protocols. Use them.
Use them. Absolutely.
Good advertisement.
Welcome to Hallway Conversations. We're a trio of educators who have plenty of questions about teaching and learning and school culture, and we believe in the value of collaboration and reflection as we seek to keep growing as teachers. So this podcast is our place for thinking out loud together about issues in education and why they might matter to Christian educators. Welcome to the conversation.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Hallway Conversations. My name is Matt Beamers.
I'm Dave Mulder.
I'm Abby DeGroat.
Richard Mouw has a wonderful book titled The Life of the Mind. It's a short but important book, and I encourage you to read it. Chapter 11 in that book is titled Safe Spaces for Playing Around. In that chapter, Mouw says, quote, safe spaces are essential for intellectual explorations, end quote. And he shares a vignette of having hallway conversations with a colleague that often concluded with the colleague stating, well, I have to get back to my office to play around with a few ideas. I think the concept of playing around with a few ideas captures what we're trying to do here. Our deep hope is to create a safe space for all of us, you and us, to learn together, and our desire is that we might be encouraged in your work and our work, and encourage you to go back to your classroom, your staff room, your boardroom, your hallway, and play around in the sandbox. And while teaching and education is a serious business, we try not to take ourselves too seriously here. Whether on the podcast or in the hallway, we like to poke fun and laugh, and we always try to carry each other's burdens as well, as we think this is what it means to live in Christian community. If you are new to Hallway Conversations, the general format is that one of us brings a question and we explore our own thinking. We also appreciate getting questions from you, our listeners. So if you have time, please email us or send us a recording of your question to hallwayconversationspod@gmail.com. That's hallwayconversationspod@gmail.com. Well, Dave and Abby, a few years ago, maybe it was longer, I came across for the first time a friend of mine, Daryl, who started using the word protocols and started implementing protocols. And it's something that I've really, has really helped me in terms of as a strategy in my classroom, in my pedagogy. And I know you guys are familiar with them too. So I'm just wondering, when you hear the word protocols, what sort of comes to mind, and maybe how do you use them? The question today then is around protocols, what it is and how you use them.
Sure.
And I'm just wondering, for our listeners, if we can share a bit of your knowledge and wisdom around them. So Dave, protocols, what comes to mind?
So I'm coming at this as a former science teacher, right?
Yeah.
And when I hear protocols, I think like we're working in the lab and we've got a protocol for our procedure, right? And this is how we're going to do it so we can be pretty sure of the outcome. It's fairly structured, right? Like that's where my brain goes immediately. And I suppose that's probably not a bad definition.
There's
right?
definitely structure.
That we're having some intentional structure for how we're going to conduct ourselves in this, right?
Right.
How about you, Abby? Where do you go?
Yeah. And I think, as not a science person.
Yeah, right?
I think I right away go to learning activities in a classroom because that's, I think, how I was introduced to protocols as a form of professional development. Actually is where I first encountered them. So long before I started using them in class with my own students, I participated in them through professional development. I don't know if I've talked about it on here, but the school I used to teach at, the high school in Iowa, there's a pretty popular professional development initiative sponsored by the local AEAs, the area education agencies, called Authentic Intellectual Work. Right. And it's built on protocols, really. Mm-hmm. So we had protocols for examining student work. So we would have a group in a PLC, in a personal learning community, we'd look at, someone would bring student work, and we would have a series of protocols and questions that we would answer around that student work. Or we would bring a task that we had designed, and we would tune it, right, with the knowledge of all of the people in the room. Or we would actually look at our own instruction. So people would come and observe, or we would talk about instruction, right, and we'd have protocols around how to talk about those things. So
So can I ask a question about that then? So when you're talking about protocols here, it's like a structured way
it
of
is. So
attacking
like
the work?
for 5 minutes, we're going to do, the person presenting is going to talk about their work.
Right.
And then there's going to be a time for clarifying questions.
Okay.
And then we are all going to silently look at it
Mhm.
for this amount of time and fill in this rubric.
Mhm.
And then everyone is going to give feedback while the presenter listens. And
Sure.
then the presenter is going to reflect on what they took away from the process. And then everybody's going to debrief. So it's just a very structured hour of how we're going to conduct our time.
And so this was for professional development.
It was.
But you guys just kind of opted in and said, these are the rules that we're going to follow. And so this is the protocol we're
Yeah, and the
using,
protocol was
right?
given to us.
Right.
Yeah, and so we just followed it and did it, and that was my first experience with it. And then I think it was after I came to Dordt I started experiencing them as a teacher and saying, oh, this has a lot of value for my classroom if I can teach students some protocols.
So the same kind of thing, but now at the classroom level.
Right.
So like I'm going to teach students the procedures. So here's how we're going to do this, and then this is the rhythm that we're going to use for exams.
Yeah. So the first time I mentioned earlier, the first time that I can remember experiencing them and hearing the word was doing Pro D at the school that I was at back in British Columbia, where Daryl was our director of learning, and for our Pro D set up this protocol, very structured. And I just remember at first being somewhat resistant to it, to be honest, because
I remember that same feeling.
Like,
what is this?
Like
this
you're just
is
telling me I have to do it. Yeah, like I
Yeah.
have to do it this way on my professional development.
It seems like a lot.
It seemed like a lot, and it seemed like my initial reaction is you're limiting our creativity. You're limiting our exploration. Like give us some room to move here. And I don't remember even what the protocol was. I just remember Daryl using them. I remember being somewhat resistant to it. And then I remember, and maybe not even right away, but over time, as he continued to use different protocols to lead our ongoing professional development, one thing I can remember at some point realizing is that within the structure, teachers felt way more freedom to participate. And so we went from Pro D that quite often hearing many of the same voices, which were wonderful, tons of wisdom there. But all of a sudden, not hearing different, just hearing more, hearing more voices.
Yeah.
So
I think that is one of the best parts about protocols, actually. As a teacher, too, thinking about whose voice in the room, it empowers.
It feels like so one of the benefits for me, at least even looking at it back then, was it levels the playing field. Because now you're saying, here's the structure, and each of you has the wisdom to bring to this discussion. And we're actually, I can remember him even being like, and sorry, Daryl, if you're listening to this, because I love Daryl. He's so brilliant. Well, first of all, Daryl, if you're listening, that's a big step in our relationship. But I remember it. There was even sort of like you get 1 minute to this.
Yeah.
You got 2 minutes to this. You're gonna think. You're gonna stand back to back. Then you're gonna listen. You're gonna ask these questions. And again, my first response was like, "What? Like, why are you limiting us?" But it really was. And if Daryl was here, he'd be yelling through the speaker to say, "To get you to stop talking for once, Matt Beamers." But there's a sense of that, right? It's to say, "You got a minute. What do you want to say?" Now it's actually someone else's turn. And I think and that's one of the things that really stood out for me in participating in it, is that it's sort of, it was a great leveler, which even in a faculty, you need.
And I remember leading high school classrooms, right, where the same 4 people led the discussion.
Oh, sure, because you've got some of those students who are just likely to speak.
If I'm just going to have a classroom discussion and ask questions, there are people who will never, ever raise their hand.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
But that doesn't mean their voice is less valuable to... So how can we enable them? And a lot of the protocols I use are with those students in mind, right?
Yeah. How do I get these students who might be reticent to be more, I was going to say more actively engaged. That's not fair.
No.
But maybe to make sure their voice is also heard.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So can you talk a little bit about that then, Abby? Like, how does that take shape in your class? You say you use these with students now. What kinds of things do you do?
Right.
How do you structure that learning?
So a couple of I was thinking back when I was preparing for this at what I've done like in the last week, right? And so I just have a list. So one of the ones that I really like for getting student voices heard is called Chalk Talk. So students aren't actually allowed to speak. So we have like these cool whiteboards here that can hang on the wall. Do you know the ones I'm talking about? Or we can take them down and like the students can write on them. They're just kind of big. And I'll put a question, maybe like 4 questions. So one on each whiteboard around the room. And I'll give every student a dry erase marker and we'll do like stations. So spend 5 minutes at this one. You're not allowed to talk, but you may write back and forth to each other. So answer the question and you're allowed to like draw arrows or stars or check marks or question, and then everybody move to the next. So I have 4 groups, 1 group right here, spend a few minutes there, then we move to the next one. You know, once everybody's been at the board, then we do a gallery walk where you go read what everybody has, and then we debrief, right? So what'd you see? And then I'm able to like kind of weave a conversation involving all of those voices on the boards. And the best part is we don't know who wrote what. Right? So we can just point to ideas. And
they emerged through this process.
Right, through the process. But everyone has contributed something because you have to write something. At the board.
That's we had excuse me, last week we were just going over perennialism, progressivism in philosophy of education. So we did some, maybe similar to that, some collaborative work where they had to do some summarizing and answer a few questions on a piece of big chart paper that we stuck on the wall. And then I gave everyone 3 orange sticky notes and 1 blue sticky note. I said, the orange is for warm feedback. I just want you to walk around and read them all. And if you see an idea in any of these isms, just stick it there. That's your way of saying, hey, this makes sense to me, or I appreciate that. And the cool feedback around, hey, like I'm not so sure about that. And it was just, and then to step back and say, hey, let's notice and wonder. It looks like there's a lot of orange sticking, a lot of warm feedback here, and a lot of cool feedback here, and have kids share out, hey, where did you use your sticker and why, right? So to first even just empower them to just walk around. I like a lot of protocols because they actually do invite people even physically to get up and move around. So, I've seen it done as well, like with dots, right? Like you get 3 dots, go around the room, do a gallery walk, what resonates, what doesn't, it just, things like that. You've shared with me, I learned this one from you last year, Abby, the go Mo. I use that in the last couple of weeks in starting a new module on the purpose of education, and 7 or 8 different quotes from different people from different backgrounds stating this is what they think the purpose of education is. So everybody just picks up a quote, they give one, they get one, they move on. So you have this discussion, you switch quotes, you move to the next one, and you just sort of...
It's a great way to preview text.
Give one,
get one, move on. Go. The
Very
best part of protocols is the cool names
right.
is that they have. But there is a sense, and like I said, there's something about, and like even when we do that, hey, I often use back-to-back, face-to-face. So even in Go Mo, here's your quote, here's a minute of reflection, and to be quiet and just to sit in that and reflect on it, and then face-to-face and have this discussion. And again, I think it's, you can, we know that as teachers, when students are engaged, you can hear the level and just walking around. And I think to me that in the end, like I found a quote that talked about protocols provide the skeleton upon which students can build their ideas. It helps shy students to participate, reins in overly enthusiastic learners, and in general levels the playing grounds that neither the student personality nor academic confusion define the results. So I just really love the language of that. Of, like I said, it's and this isn't the right word, but I was thinking as you were talking about voice and things like that, it's, and not that you need to give permission, but it sort of invites or gives permission for people to engage in this dialogue.
And it sets the expectation, right? That everyone in this class is a learner, is valuable, and their voice is valued, right? And we expect them to participate. It's an expectation. It's not you can come and sit and not think or do or participate.
Maybe just brainstorm some more for our listeners. What are some other protocols that we typically like? I'll share one that I use. So I teach online a lot, and I like teaching online. So in an online discussion, so often like I'll use like the classic protocols: post once and respond twice, right? But that falls so flat, right? Like students get into it like, whoopie ding, here we go again. And so instead I've changed it, and my expectation I make clear to them is you should be part of the conversation. Well, how does that take shape? Well, here's our protocol. It's called Phi3, and it's 3 words that end in the letters FY, right? So when you respond to a student, you're going to either amplify, which means you agree, and so you can't just say you agree. Carry the conversation forward. I agree, and amplify. Or you can clarify, and clarify means you're going to ask a question in response. So, hey, you said this. Did you mean this? Refining their thinking somehow. Or, so amplify, clarify, or diversify. Diversify is respectfully, I think differently, and here's, right? But no matter how you respond, like you've got to have something, like carry it forward. We're not just going to agree with each other and then move on.
And that increases the quality of the conversation, right? Which is what protocols should do.
Yes, that's right.
Yes.
Right? Yeah. What else are you doing, Tammy?
Yeah. I like to think of ones that are engaging, right? So our brains crave novelty too. And so I like to have some fun with protocols. Yesterday I had one of my intro to Ed Site class. We did 2 truths and a lie about some of the content that they read. So their reading assignment, we were talking about some of the structures of language, so phonology and syntax and morphology. And so they had to become an expert in one of those. They got assigned one, and they had to write as their homework 2 truths and a lie about that piece. And then they got together, we jigsawed it, right? So they got together in their home group. So all the morphology people got together and shared theirs, and they came to a really good understanding of what morphology is together. And then we jigsawed it, and they played 2 truths and a lie. So they had to listen to, okay, here's my 3 statements, and everyone else had to guess which one was the lie, right, about it. And then, so they went all the way around, and then they scored themselves and who got the most, right, who could tell the most. So even thinking about content understanding, right? It's not always like, sometimes it's just understanding the content that can be useful with protocols. So what I love about protocols is they have very different purposes, right? So sometimes it's about really higher order synthesis of text or ideas, and sometimes it's just, we're going to do this as a fun way to make sure we really know the content we read.
Right.
Yeah. So that's another one I use.
Yesterday we were looking at, in philosophy of education, we're looking at a Jamie Smith quote. He's got this quote about, what if education wasn't first and foremost about this, the saturation of the intellect, and so we kind of, I don't know, AAA or 3A. Hey, what do you argue? What do you want to argue about? What do you want to agree with, and what do you want to aspire to? In this quote, and so that's just a nice one for engaging, like a piece of a piece of text, and so the AAA one is a good one. Another one we use in some of my online courses is when they're doing a project or presentation at the end, kind of a critical friends. So they practice their presentation. They're in small groups, and critical friends is basically it's a protocol where, hey, you give your presentation. When you're done, then you actually listen to your other group members talk about your presentation, and you can't say anything. And then the next part is like they can ask questions of the presenter, and you can only answer the questions. Then you sort of give some feedback, like what have you heard? Feedback if you heard. But it's basically a tuning protocol.
It is. I was gonna say it sounds like a tuning protocol.
Yeah, it's a tuning protocol that and you can the way we set it up is that the presentation's 15 minutes, the tuning protocol's 15 minutes, and you can play with that. But it's just a way again. It's a way of saying, no, like you've done this presentation, you're actually going to listen to people. You may not talk, right? And you have to just listen to people talk about what you've done. And again, it gives people permission to either not respond or but just say, hey, I need to receive and listen. And it's a way to give people opportunity to give kind, specific, helpful feedback. I think another one that I use that's really simple, what I've found really valuable, is simply like check-in questions and exit tickets. I just think like check-in questions Sometimes I relate them to what we're going to, the topic at hand.
Yep.
Sometimes they're actually just fun and playful, and the learning target is I can build fun relationship with my neighbor.
Sure.
Like I think Dave, you might have seen this. We just the check-in question a couple weeks ago. Like, what's a theme song from a television show in your childhood that you remember?
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
And it was actually pretty funny. Like it's like it was
great.
so loud in there. Like they're
Yeah.
all, and
They're humming
and
along.
bonus points if you can see, and it takes 5 minutes, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I know for me it can be hard because I can be tight-fisted with my time.
Sure.
Like it's like 7-8 minutes after already, and it's
Yeah.
only a 50-minute class. And on the other hand, what does that relationship building and trust allow you to do in the next 42 minutes?
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
That
That you
maybe-
otherwise wouldn't
That
have.
you otherwise
Yeah.
wouldn't because trust is being built.
Yeah.
And then exit tickets, with check-in questions. I can remember a good friend of mine, Ashley, in grade 3. She built a fake campfire out of an old Kleenex box, and they called it campfire in the morning.
Sure.
They gather around the campfire,
Mm-hmm.
and they would just have, and it was wonderful to observe. Like she'd have, again, fun questions, playful questions. Passing was always normative, even, which I
Sure.
appreciated.
But even that, that's part of the protocol.
That's
then,
part of
the
This is
protocol,
how
yeah.
we're going to do this.
You can pass, and there is no judgment or shame attached with that. And then I think exit tickets, again, I learned this one from Daryl, just very simply, like one that he's used that I really appreciate is, again, circle up. Passing's normative, but I used to think, but now I know,
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
right? So just
That's a
sort
good
of
one.
like
I used that one yesterday. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
right.
good.
I used to
Yeah.
think, but now I know, and that's fascinating too because it's some of the things that they've keyed in on that
Right.
in a good way are
Yeah.
surprising.
That metacognition piece, though.
Yeah.
Right? That we were getting them to think about how their own understanding
Totally.
is changing.
To think about your thinking.
Yep.
Right. And
Right?
it's incredible formative assessment
Yeah.
for you
Yeah.
as the person
for
who
sure.
ran the class,
Yeah.
right? Because it gives you such insight in a very short amount of
Yeah.
time as to what their takeaways
Yeah.
are
Yeah.
in ways you couldn't get to
Mm-hmm.
if you collected
Yeah.
something
Yeah.
and had to, it's just so easy.
Yeah. Like another one we'll use, like engaging text. Simply, hey, read through this piece once, underline or highlight a sentence.
Mhm.
Okay, read through it again, highlight a phrase, read through it again, highlight a word, and let's just share out on that.
Yeah.
Like why that sentence, why that phrase, why did that word resonate with you? How about you, Dave?
So I do some writing protocols too.
Yeah.
When you mentioned that, I like that. So in Introduction to Education, we look at snippets of text all the time, and one of the things I do is I'll actually print it out in hard copy and give it to them, just a paragraph at a time, something that we need to consider. And I'll read. The protocol is I call it exploding text, right? So I'll read it aloud to them, and I always read it twice. That's part of the protocol too. As I read it, just underline or circle words and phrases that grab your imagination.
Yeah.
And then you're going to have 2 minutes to say why. Why did those grab your
Yeah.
imagination? So trying to make connections, things that we've read, things you've seen in school, some of the vocabulary you're learning for this class, whatever it is. And then it's a structured protocol, right? So they have 2 minutes to think on their own, and then they have 3 minutes to talk at their table with their table partners, and then we take about 10 minutes as a whole group always.
Yeah.
And so kind of that expanding circle, we're just exploding the text to come to understand things deeply that way. And the other one I like as an exit ticket is I'll do a 3-2-1.
Yeah, I love those.
And 3-2-1, it can be anything. Write 3 something, write 2 something, write 1 something. So write 3 new ideas that you had from class today. Write 2 things that you had confirmed that you thought before and now you really think. And write the 1 burning question that you need answered before next class, right? Or whatever. Like that's just for instance. But those can be so helpful just to give structure to the things that you're trying to accomplish in the class,
Right. Totally.
Yes.
Yeah, I like them too for group conversations, really quickly, like you mentioned, back-to-back, face-to-face. Another one I do that gets students just up and moving, especially, like if you're reading the room and you have a question, but you can tell you're losing them a little bit, right? I'll do like a speed dating protocol.
Yeah.
So
I've heard of this. Can you explain?
Yeah,
this?
so everyone, like I did it in my room the other day where we have tables that are across, and we have 2 aisles, right? So I said, okay, everybody go to one aisle and face a partner.
Yeah.
And then I'll ask a question, and you have 2 minutes to talk about it, right? And then I'll say stop, and then we'll rotate. And it's just like a speed dating, if you've ever seen them, like the bell rings, right, and you move to the next person. And then they talk about the same thing, or you can give them a new question, right? So they get to people that they don't sit by because you're going up and down the rows. and they're up and they're active, which I think always gets you better conversations than if they're seated.
Yeah.
Right?
So that's a silly program. As you say that one, I remembered a protocol I call walkie-talkie, and sometimes I'll do the same thing. If it seems like the energy in the room is getting too low, and you can't do this every day, and it depends on your layer of school. One of the classrooms I teach in, we've got kind of a natural loop in the building, and so I'll say, here's your prompt. You have 3 minutes to go walk around the loop and then come back, and you're going to report out what you talked about. And so you grab your partner, and they go take a walk, and they know that it's time dependent. You've got 3 minutes to come to an answer to this question. Come back and sit down. We're going to share out, right? And that can be really engaging to improve the quality of conversation, like you say.
Yeah.
Because as we're talking about this, it makes me, and I'm painting with a bit of a wide brush here, but it feels like as I listen to even you talk about your protocols, I just wrote down it seems like 3 things that in general they have common. It encourages active listening, like this idea I need to be present with someone.
Yeah.
But it also, so many of them have built in time for reflection, and we know reflection is so important to learning at every age. Like this idea of anytime you can get students to reflect on their learning. So
is that a Dewey quote, right? Is there a Dewey quote about reflection? Right. I didn't learn because I did. I learned because I reflected on what I did, or it's something.
Yep.
Listen to you quoting Dewey. Of course you're quoting Dewey.
No,
honestly, that's up for that makes sense to me, Abby. Actually, so it's a listening reflection, and then it seems to me that just listening to you and as you guys talk, and I know you put high value on this anyways, is that there is an element of community building of that, and and it's so interesting to me that all those kind of goes together. If you have a classroom where people are listening and reflecting, you are maybe one of the natural outcomes of that is that you're also going to be building community. And maybe for me, as I'm even reflecting on protocols today, it's like I've never thought of protocols as community building, but building trust and all these other things and relationships and learning. And so it just strikes me that maybe those are some of the things that protocols have in common.
I agree.
Protocols, use them!
Use them, absolutely.
Good advertisement.
Friends, we know that your time is valuable, and we want to thank you for joining us in the hallway today. Thank you for the good, God-delighting work that you are doing, and we hope that the Lord gives you what you stand in need of in the coming week. And finally, we would like to send you into your day and week with this blessing. So to our listeners, who we are so thankful for, may the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord make his face shine upon you and be gracious to you. May the Lord turn his face towards you and give you peace, and give you peace, and give you peace. Amen. Thanks for listening, everyone, and have a good week.
This podcast was quite literally dreamed up during one of our actual hallway conversations. Our music is by Ethan Mulder. Hallway Conversations is an independent podcast created and produced by Matt Beamers, Abby DeGroat, and Dave Mulder. Thanks for listening.